there. Hope everybody can hear us. We are doing this virtually and in person. We've got a small group here with us in person, but we're going to do our best to kind of navigate both avenues here. So let's see. Oh, do we have to escape this? Okay. So today we are going to be talking about applied behavior analysis and how you can use it to teach transitional skills to the students that you're working with in Project Search and in your transition programs. So by the end of today's workshop, we hope that you guys will be able to describe at least 3 different hazards that you want to avoid when you're building relationships. So we are going to talk about a lot of things that we want you to do, but first we're going to start with some things that we want you to avoid. We're also going to talk about how to develop a task analysis, which is a way to break down a skill that you'll be able to utilize to teach skills and to measure them when you're collecting data for IEPs or reporting. And another thing that we are going to work on is behavior skills training. So that's something that you're going to be able to use with your students when you're teaching them new skills. So those are all the things we're going to try to squeeze into 3 hours today. And my name is Kelly Long. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and I work with Lawrence One Schools. I'm the autism coordinator there, and I've been there for 2 years now, and it's a great place to work. We have a really great team. I work with Christy Tower here. She's one of our autism consultants, and we've got 3 other consultants with us, and we have a really great transitions team too. We've got Ann and Tina and just a great team that we all are really, I'm lucky that we get to work so collaboratively together. Christy, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm also a BCBA, and like Kelly said, I'm one of the autism consultants at Florence. I've only been there for about a year. I consulted there for about 1.5 years beforehand. So I stuck around and I've liked it a lot so far. Kelly and she was actually like my supervisor when I started, who got me into ABA about like 10 years ago. So we've been able to work across a lot of different environments together. So it's really great to be here with you guys all today.
Yeah, we both actually started off working with the really little kiddos in an autism clinic, and now we're in the school setting. And I'm really happy to be here today to just kind of show how applied behavior analysis can even be used in all these different avenues. So that's really what we're going to get into now is what is ABA? Have you all heard of ABA before? Okay.
Yes.
It's a big, large group here.
Yeah.
Okay. So ABA is really just a science of human behavior. And when we're working on it, we're targeting skills that are socially significant. They're going to have a big impact on our learners' lives. We're not just going to pick something to work on because it's in the standards and it says we have to do it. It's got to be meaningful and functional. So that's super important. And we use evidence-based strategies. These are some of the strategies that we use, and you all have probably used them and didn't even realize that it was applied behavior analysis. So these are all things though that aren't just used with children with autism. I'm sure you can see, reinforcement, prompting. You probably use those with your kids at home or your spouses at home. We use these things all the time. So the purpose of ABA though is really to target those socially significant skills, and a huge part of it is to generalize those skills. So not only do we work on them in the school setting or that one-on-one setting, but we don't say that a skill is fully mastered until the student is able to take it and use it in their natural environment. Thanks. We want to make sure it's purposeful and that they can use it when they need to use it in real life. We want to make language and behaviors functional for our learners. So making sure that everyone has the most independence that they can have and that they can be successful. And we do spend a lot of time understanding the reason for problem behavior and teaching functionally equivalent skills. Maybe. Okay.
So before we get into all of these strategies, we just wanted to kind of address that, in a lot of different healthcare fields or teaching or anything, we just wanted to address like some misuse about it. So with anything, we really want to, recognize like the limitations and the use of aversive punishment procedures, and how, that has maybe led to behavior analysis focusing on effective, efficient, safer, and function-based interventions. So there's bad dentists, there's poor teachers, there's poor doctors. Not everyone's going to be perfect. And so we just wanted to, address that and really show that while there are punishment procedures, it's not something that we ever want to use first. And there's things we really want to avoid. So we're going to go in a lot about how to use reinforcement first and a lot of effective strategies to increase the appropriate behaviors we want to see rather than necessarily put in punishment procedures. Like Kelly and I both said, we're board certified behavior analysts. So we just wanted to address as well that we do have an ethics code. And so if you are working with other BCBAs in the field, this is a website that you guys can all follow just to make sure that, you feel comfortable with the BCBA you're working with. And just like any other profession, make sure that they are being ethical and you have an avenue to kind of, report that and discuss that with other people, especially because it is a new profession. Okay, so like Kelly began to say, ABA is not just used for skill acquisition or behavior reduction for individuals with autism. So that really is kind of how we maybe came about learning about ABA or where you first heard of it. I know that's the first time I heard of it even is working with kids with autism. And that's because of good old insurance. But there's a lot of different ways that we use ABA every day in our lives with everyone. People who are neurotypical, other adults, little kids, we use ABA all the time. So beyond autism, in schools, we might see behavior reduction. So if there's aggression, bullying, disruption, off-task behavior, property destruction, a lot of things that maybe kids get suspended for, written up for. We want to look at decreasing those behaviors. But we also can't forget about the skill acquisition part. So once we decrease that problem behavior, we really then have to focus on the skill acquisition part. So what behavior can we replace that problem behavior with to allow that child, student, adult to learn something better to put in its place? So just some examples, like Kelly was saying, everyone needs to have that functional form of communication. So we want to teach maybe appropriate communication strategies. That might be at the basic level, just how to communicate, how to use your words, how to use an AAC device, how to use picture exchange, or if they are, neurotypical or just other children who have higher skill sets, it might just be appropriate communication of socializing with peers and how to talk to peers or how to talk to other people and asking questions. So there's a huge spectrum of communication skills that we can teach as well. Improve student performance in academic subjects, social skills, safety skills, and vocational skills. So as you can see, there's a really wide range, which also means that there's a lot of opportunities for that collaboration. So while we, really want to work on maybe communication strategies with people, we know that we're not the experts in communication. We might be the experts in behavior and how to increase that communication, but we really want to make sure that we are working collaboratively with speech pathologists. Same thing with improving student performance in the academic subjects. We really want to make sure that we're working collaboratively with teachers, reading coaches, things like that, because you all then are the experts in that. So we really want to make sure that everything is super collaborative. So no matter what skill you're teaching, a BCBA might be an expert in the behavior portion, but everyone else is the expert in the other areas. So there's really that collaboration that needs to happen. So functions of behavior, this is something that could be an entire workshop on its own. So we're going to try to put it in just to a couple slides. And feel free to kind of respond on the chat too. Have you guys all heard or talked about the functions of behavior before, or maybe know what some of them are or how many there are?
I do.
Yeah.
There's 4.
There are 4. Yes, there are 4.
Awesome.
It doesn't seem like a lot, but once we go through, we can kind of talk about maybe how, there might be some misconceptions about that, or if you have questions, feel free to kind of chime in. So the first function is sensory. So there's going to be an acronym here, so hopefully it'll be easy to remember. So with sensory, if something's happening for that reason, an individual maybe likes to do this because it feels good, it sounds good, or it tastes good. And this behavior could also have become a habit. So for me personally, I will pick my nails a lot. I will play with my hair, not because it gets me anything or gets me out of anything. It's just a habit that I formed that is probably sometimes disruptive, but it has no other function other than it's sensory. So you might be kind of starting to think about some behaviors that you might see with some of your students and adults that you work with, that, some of their behavior might be occurring for sensory reasons.
And really quick, Christy, she is neurotypical, so she has the ability to recognize when it might be appropriate to pick at her nails and when not. If she's not going to do it right now when she's presenting in front of all of you, but maybe someone with autism might not really care about that. So, learning to differentiate when those types of things are appropriate and when they're not.
Yeah. And sometimes, it probably will still happen a little bit. And sometimes, that is okay. So it's not super disruptive, like I'm going to be probably going back and forth like this a lot, just because I'm a little nervous, and we just never know. So there's lots of reasons. The second one is escape. So an individual does not want to do the task or the instruction given because it's difficult. Maybe it's prolonged, or they don't want to really be in that specific place or with that person. So they want to escape the situation or the environment or the demand, or they just want to avoid it altogether before it even happens. So I'm sure now, again, you're thinking like all the things that some kids have done in the past to really prolong, doing something. I think like a classic example of this is like when you're putting a kid to bed and they're like, I need a glass of water. Oh, can I have one more hug, one more story? They might need want all that stuff, but it's probably to escape that time. So again, this isn't just the reasons that, kids with autism or other developmental disability engage in. This is why everyone engages in behavior. Only these 4 reasons.
So one, and I just want to point this out really quick because I always remember this, is a lot of parents will also, if they're with their kids, they'll send them to their room. And if you think about what a kid's room usually looks like right now, so first off, they're escaping the behavior, and then they're going to someplace that they really like to be. So it's not really like a win-win situation. So you want to make sure that I've seen it happen on several occasions.
And that's why we want to talk about the functions, because it's so important to know why a behavior is happening before you can really work on it. It's really unethical for us to try to work on a behavior before we know why it's happening, because we could actually accidentally make it worse.
Yeah, great point. Yes, and please chime in like that as much as you'd like.
I have one. I have one more after that.
And everyone too.
Yeah.
So the third one is attention. So an individual wants attention from an adult or a peer, and the really big thing that we want to push is that it doesn't matter if that attention is positive or negative. So, some kids might be engaging in a problem behavior just to kind of, poke your nerves. And just because you're not smiling at them and telling them good job or giving them something, they like that maybe yelling. They like that eye roll or that stare or that point, positive and negative attention are both attention. So that's going to be really important to kind of think once you can kind of hone in on maybe why someone is doing something. If they're doing it for attention, eye contact, scolding, yelling, reprimanding, or just merely like explaining the reasons why or why not to do something, that's all attention.
Mhm. I had to explain this one to my husband recently. We have a 13-month-old daughter, and so she's really getting into things now. And I told him, save no for something really dangerous. We don't want to kill no by saying no to everything. But he's struggling with that one. But he's like, I'm yelling at her. I'm saying no mean, and it's not. But she likes it. And I'm like, yeah, she's getting that reaction from you, and her behavior is increasing. So that means it's not working.
Well, this
stop
is
doing
another
it.
thing that I had to share like with you guys. Kelly and I used to work together. Christy was there before I was there, but like Kelly and I worked together for many years. She actually supervised me for a long time. And I don't know why this story sticks, is the sunglasses story, where some kid was in the middle of a behavior, but it was such an attention-seeking behavior, and the kid must have hit you, and her glasses went crooked, and she couldn't put them back because she didn't want to give that attention any behavior, or that behavior any attention. So she's still in the middle of doing it, and her glasses are all like off to the side, because I remember you saying if you did that, if that kid's behavior would continually amp up. I don't know why that just sticks.
I do remember that now. Well, and that kiddo really picked up on anything. Like if I would have fixed him, he would have been like, "Ooh, that got to her," So
she had to stay really like deadpan and like and that's not always easy.
It is not always easy, and you might have to hum a song in your head or just go somewhere else. And it can look like you're doing nothing, but it is by far the hardest thing that you can do. Definitely.
And I just want to put in there too, this is also not to say that you should ignore every inappropriate behavior, or if someone is running away, you ignore them because they want them to chase you. Like safety obviously always comes first. And like we said, this could be a whole entire workshop on its own. So there's a lot more that goes into this. So, make sure you consult with your team and really, have that data collection to really show and come up with that plan. But just as that side note, to make sure, let everyone know we're not advocating to just ignore everything.
Right.
So the last one is tangible. So an individual wants something. This could be toys, a food, an activity, just anything that's tangible. So hopefully the acronym SEAT will help you kind of remember those like 4 functions. So any behavior that any of us engage in ever is because of one of these 4 reasons.
And it could be for 2 different reasons. Like Diane's example, where the kid got sent to their room. So not only did they escape, but maybe in their room is their train station or their PlayStation and their video games. So I get to escape this situation and I get access to all these fun things. So we see that a lot. Or attention, you might get removed from the room, but then you get, talked to one-on-one, and I come down to your level and we have this conversation. So a lot of times it's maintained by more than one thing, which can make it really tricky.
And you want to think about yourself too. Like what are some things that you might do, like procrastination, like that's a behavior, like you're trying to escape doing something, you don't want to do it.
In grad school, my house has never been so clean.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the ABCs of behavior, and this is going to be that process to figure out that function. So sometimes it is going to be super obvious for some kids when they do something. It's like, I know they're whining because they don't want to go upstairs, or I know they're grabbing for that cookie because they want that cookie. They want that tangible. They want that food. Sometimes it's not going to be as simple, especially with some more complex behaviors, or just things that just lasted for a very long time, or if there's a lot of staff members working with people. So we're going to go through the ABCs. So is this more familiar with people? Has anyone heard like the ABCs behavior? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we usually see, I personally usually see like people are, taught the acronym and have the ABC, but then it kind of stops before like the function. So we'll be able to mesh some of those together for you.
This is always really good data to have, that you could even start collecting before say you were just thinking that, one of your students needed an FBA or they needed some additional help. If you went ahead and started collecting some of this data, that would be really useful for your team to have. Because sometimes when we come in, everything's perfect and it's the best day ever.
Yeah.
And so we don't get to see some of those things.
Yeah. Or it's the same thing. I mean, it's things happen at home, but like they're perfect in school. Like kids are going to, and adults, we all act differently in different environments. So the A is for antecedent. So the antecedent is what happened immediately before the behavior occurs. So what triggers the behavior, and it's immediately before. The behavior is obviously the person's specific response. So what is that person doing and engaging in? And then the C stands for consequence. What happens after the behavior? So immediately after, and what is it's the response to the behavior. So with the word consequence too, we want to try to push to the back of our minds kind of what that word usually kind of means. We always think of like consequence as negative. With the ABCs of behavior and how we want to think of it now, the consequence is really just what happens right afterwards. So that could be really positive. The consequence could be, getting that cookie or getting a high five or getting a hug or something positive. So once we go through this, just really try to kind of push that away of like consequence always meaning something that's bad. So we're just going to kind of go through some examples so you guys can be super involved. So the antecedent. So we'll just go through a couple of these. So remember, these are the triggers. So I'm going to go ahead and read these and tell you what the behavior is. And we can talk about what the behavior is because we have to know that first. Before we know what the antecedent is, we have to know what the behavior is and what we're looking for. So with the first one, John throws his pencil after being asked to open the book. So the behavior is obviously John throwing his pencil. What would the antecedent be in this sentence? Yep, he's being asked to open the book. So in this case, it's that demand. So second one, Ben begins to scream when the teacher gives Alex the iPad.
So the behavior would be Ben screaming. Okay, and what would the antecedent be?
Yep.
Right, good. Giving Alex
Nice.
that.
Even though the sentence was incorrectly written by me.
I was
Yeah.
like, that iPad better have right back after this.
Gives Alex the iPad. Oh man. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the teacher gave someone that iPad. Last one, when the teacher begins helping another student, Allison starts screaming or yelling. So the behavior is that yelling. What's the antecedent to that?
Is helping the other student.
Yep, it's helping the other student. So in those examples, they are all those kind of like problem behaviors, things that we want to decrease. But in the last example, I just want to show it doesn't necessarily need to be an antecedent that is directly involving the student's behavior that we are looking at. So in this example, when a teacher begins helping another student, nothing's really happening maybe to Allison over here, but I'm the teacher, I'm going to help someone. We really want to look at, it's not that the antecedent is, well, there was no trigger. I didn't even talk to her. I didn't tell her to do anything. I didn't take something away. There was no antecedent. There's always going to be an antecedent. We want to look at that entire environment.
And be as objective as possible. Try to take any sort of assumptions or feelings away. Stay away from, she was having a bad day, she's tired, because those are all just things that you think you're not really sure of, but for sure that as soon as the teacher started helping another student, that's when she started screaming. Try to stick to things that you can observe and see.
Yep. So even though just from these, we might kind of start to think about, okay, I think I know why John threw that pencil. This is where we really want to get into, like Kelly was saying, that objective, just labeling of that environment. And after we go through that ABC, then we will identify the function. So in some of these simpler examples, it is going to be really easy to, kind of think and say, oh, he threw that pencil because he didn't want to open his book. He wanted to escape. But we really want to make sure, especially when things get more complex, And just, I don't know, people are curveballs. Sometimes you think you know, but you don't.
Well,
So-
I have a really good one that just to
Yeah.
give you, I was working with you, I'll tell you who it is later, but when I was doing ABA, a little guy that we were playing Here's a Who, we're sitting on the floor having the time of our lives, and just out of nowhere, smack across the face, and then he just goes right back to playing, and I'm like, what in the world was that about? And I, if you think about it now, I mean, we were like, should we start tracking this? But I think I'm pretty sure it was a sensory need at the time. He was probably just like seeking some sort of sensory, and I was right
Mhm.
there at the time. But that's one of those ones where the antecedent, something's happening, but you're not always like,
Yeah.
where did that come from? Like, just he
Yeah.
was so content, and then all of a sudden it was just like a change, and then he was
Mhm.
content
Yeah.
again. Like, so that consequence wasn't negative in the end, because he did, I mean, for me it was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but for him, it really wasn't as much, so, because
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
then we had to obviously work on like, okay, when you have sensory needs, this is what we do instead of smacking somebody across the face.
And that behavior could have been, some kids might have slapped her because then it was her turn.
Or maybe she was winning and
Yeah.
he wanted to win,
Mhm.
so that is why you've got to look at it. from-
Yeah. And like she said, it seemed like it came out of nowhere. So if they were to maybe track ABC data, that antecedent, that trigger that we want to write in is, playing a game. It was right before his turn. I just finished my turn. We don't know that reason. I'm just going to label and say exactly what happened. And that's going to, as we get more data, kind of look to see maybe those patterns. So the B is behavior. So we really want to make sure that this is observable and measurable. We don't want it to be vague or subjective. So we're going to go through a couple examples. So tantrum. How many different types of tantrums have you seen? My definition of tantrum might be very different from Kelly's. Disrespectful. That's my favorite / least favorite. Disrespect can mean so many different things to different people. So we really want to make sure that we're objective. So actually, let me go back. So tantrum, we want to be objective. A clearer one for tantrum would be crying and flopping to the floor. Now that might only be the definition for Kelly. If someone was describing my tantrum, it might be stomping my feet and throwing an object. So it's really going to be very individualized. We just really want to make sure it's very clear and observable.
And that way, if I'm collecting data on it, I'm tracking the exact same thing as Diane is. When she comes in, she could easily see, oh yeah, okay, crying and flopping on the floor, that's definitely what is happening.
Yeah.
And so we're tracking the same thing.
Yeah. And even if she doesn't know that person, I mean, how many times have we don't get to see all of the students all the time and all day. You might be going in just for an hour, depending on what you're doing. And so if you don't know that kid very, very well, you could still look at that observable definition and know, yes, this is happening, or no, it's not happening.
Another one on there though that I found, especially with transition age,
Mhm.
is the use of appropriate and inappropriate behavior.
Mhm.
Like, what
Yeah.
does that mean necessarily? Because
Yeah.
you could say to a kid, are you acting appropriate? If they haven't really learned what that definition is, but I
Yeah.
don't know if they are. So that's definitely another very big, if
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
defined,
That's
Right.
a great
And
example.
Even with us, I'm sure my definition of appropriate is different than
Mhm.
Christie's,
Mhm.
And it's a
And
big
it's-
word for like even little kids, if you think about it, if you keep saying it, and has anybody ever defined that word for them?
Well, and that's also one that changes based on your environment. Appropriate in this setting is going to look completely different than appropriate in my house. I mean, I can talk how I want at home and, maybe use language I wouldn't use here. And, that's appropriate, I'm at home. But it's really hard for our kids to, again, make that discrimination. So those are all things that we have to think about and take into account. And same thing with good, oh, we had a good day or we had a bad day. That's not really giving us a lot of information.
And it's also going to really depend on the age. So going back to something being an appropriate or inappropriate, a second grader telling like a poop joke is pretty appropriate, and appropriate for their age. And you might need to teach them, different environments to do that in. But we really have to take into consideration too, maybe what their peers are doing or how old they are as well, what's going to be appropriate and what's going to be inappropriate.
And I do think that kind of also goes to, working with that adult population and, respecting their individuality and, if some of our students may engage in stereotypy and if they want to do that, let them do that. They can do that. And they can learn where maybe it's appropriate or, where they can do certain sort of stems and where not to do them. You can teach them those skills. We're not trying to take away their autonomy or, make them any different. We're just trying to set them up for success and, let them be successful in those environments.
Yeah, great point. So when you're, looking at a behavior and trying to define it, think of things that you can count, whether it's like duration or how many times something is happening. If you can't do that, then you might need to hone in and really make your definition a little bit more clear and a little bit more objective. So this is just some examples. So for this first one, maybe the parent says, Mary is so non-compliant at home. Is he? Oh, there's another typo. Is she bad at school too? Maybe the teacher says, Mary can be stubborn, but she's usually fine. What does non-compliant mean? From this, can you guys gather really any information about Mary? Not really. Stubborn might be that she crosses her arms or doesn't follow instructions. So something a little bit more objective. Mary yells after I tell her to do her chores and it takes her at least 5 minutes to start. Does she start immediately for you? Mary doesn't yell, but she will ask for help. So when we're even having those exchanges, it's a great time to practice really labeling and making those behaviors objective, just to kind of get used to it. So now the teacher might be able to, take some latency data, see how long it takes for Mary to actually start. Because if she hasn't been taking data on it, maybe she knows like, yeah, it does take her about 5 minutes now that I've timed it. I'm gonna let that parent know now. And maybe that's something that we can work on. Or you might time it and say, oh no, it only takes 1 minute. Like maybe we can help collaborate with the parent to let her know what we're doing that's making Mary successful so they can do that in the same environment.
Yeah, and I think this would help too, if you are speaking with teachers or, the people at the work employment places, if they're giving you kind of one of those vague statements, you could ask those more detailed questions. Okay, what does that really look like? When you say non-compliant, show me what he does. That way you're getting that information so that then you can kind of help make those changes.
Mm-hmm. So in the last one is C, consequence. So like we said, what happens immediately after that behavior? And remember, it's not always a bad thing. Consequences can be good things too. They either maintain a behavior. So if a consequence happens and that behavior is more likely to occur, that means that the consequence was reinforcing. It reinforced that behavior. So now in the future, it's going to occur more often. Or that consequence might be punishing, which means that in the future, that behavior is going to stop. And remember that all of that behavior serves a function. So these are just like some pictures of some immediate consequences. When I press that button on a pop machine, it's gonna come out. So once I put money in, are you laughing that I said
Yes.
pop? Soda machine, yeah. I'm gonna be more likely to press that button and not hit the side of it, because when I press the button, a Pepsi comes out. When I hit the side of it, nothing happens. So I'm not going to hit the side of it. I'm going to press that button because immediately a Pepsi came out. When I touch the stove and it's hot, I learned very quickly not to touch that stove because it hurts. So that consequence was me maybe burning my hand. So that was punishing, because in the future, if I see that stove, I'm not going to touch it anymore. So putting it together, we're just going to go through a couple examples. So Michael is working in laundry and supposed to be folding towels. His instructor walks in and Michael tells his instructor it's too hard, and then he pushes the towels onto the floor. His instructor shows him how to fold the towels and helps him finish the rest of his stack. So in this example, what would be the antecedent?
Should we do the behavior first?
Or the behavior? Yeah, you can do the behavior first. Yep.
Pushing the towels on the floor.
Yep, pushing the towels on the floor. There's one other thing that he also does. Sometimes those like happen together. Yep, he says it's too hard and he pushes the towels on the floor. Sometimes there might be multiple behaviors that happen together. And what's nice about that too is that, you know, eventually down the road, if he just says it's too hard and he doesn't push the towels over, that's a little better. So when we have that really detailed data, we can kind of know and see the future as well. So that's the behavior, is pushing over the towels and saying it's too hard. What is the antecedent to that? Yep, he's working in there. So that's kind of that environment. And then something happens right before. So kind of look at what happened immediately before he says that's too hard.
His instructor walks in.
That's
Yep.
right.
Exactly.
A voice from behind the
I
computer.
know. That was great. Thanks. Yeah. So, oh, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. The instructor walks in. Michael immediately says it's too hard and pushes his towels on the floor. And then that consequence is the instructor helps Michael fold the towels. Go ahead.
So what do you think the future likelihood of that behavior is going to be? So Michael saying it's too hard and pushing the towels on the floor, is that behavior going to go increase in the future or decrease?
I would say decrease.
Okay.
That behavior will decrease in it.
Why do you think decrease?
Because maybe he said it was hard because maybe he was just put there to start folding the towels.
Mhm.
But with the instructor going in and assisting him, maybe he's showing him how he can make it easier for him to fold the towels.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he didn't know how to do it, and now he's showing how to do it for sure, definitely. And that, again, that's why we have to look at the function, because if it was just a skill deficit, then he just needed to be taught, that's all. Let's say he does know how to do this, and he just really hates it. And so he doesn't want to be folding the towels. If the instructor comes in and does it for him and helps him, in the future, him saying it's too hard and throwing that stuff on the floor is probably going to increase because it actually got him out of having to fold so many.
Yeah.
So again, though, that is a great point, because that's why we want to know why it's happening. Because you would treat that two totally different ways, right?
Mhm.
You would either teach the student the skill, or you would have to work on, them sustaining a skill that they don't like as much. So that's why that function is so important.
Yep. So what would be that potential function for this? Remember our acronym, SEAT. Yep, he's, wanting to escape and avoid folding those towels.
And it could even be maybe some attention too, because
Yeah.
now he's got a partner in there with him
Yep.
who's folding the towels with him. And I'd rather fold with somebody
Yeah.
probably too.
It's not abnormal to.
No,
there
no.
be multiple functions.
Exactly.
For sure.
Because I mean, maybe his instructor comes in and puts some music on. Like,
Yeah, that's
why
way
you have
better.
to pay attention to what's
I
happening.
had a kid that used to flip flop, in a session, it would go from attention to escape, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God. Like, trying to figure out how to work through that is really tough, because,
Yeah.
and that's how I knew. I told his mom, I was like, don't underestimate this kid. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm like, he's smart enough to be able to go back and forth, and this was the kid that could push you for sure, so you have to.
Yeah.
And we took a lot of agency data on this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we do know, it's not going to necessarily be as simple and clear cut as this. There's a lot of other things going on in the environment, but just kind of practicing with examples. Did I hear someone
I don't know.
or chime in? Okay. Sorry, I don't know if anyone wanted to chime in. Sorry.
Okay.
So the next example, similar. So Michael is working in laundry and supposed to be folding his towels. His instructor walks in and Michael asks for help. His instructor shows him how to fold the towels and helps him finish the rest of his stack. So what's the behavior in this one that Michael engages in?
And the behavior is just anything. It doesn't have to be something bad.
Yeah.
Behavior is
Yeah.
He asks
Yep, he asked for help. So the behavior in the situation is Michael asked for help. And what's the antecedent? What triggered Michael asking for help? Yep, it's the same antecedent. And then what's the consequence?
The instructor showed him.
Yep, the instructor showed him how to fold the towels. So in this situation, we have the same antecedent, we have the same consequence. The behavior is a little bit different. Now, what do we think that potential function is? And do we think this asking for help is going to increase in the future or decrease? Of Michael.
I would think that you would see him asking for help more.
Yeah.
Like, definitely increasing if you start the payment to help him,
Yeah.
as opposed to doing it for him, helping him.
Right.
Less,
Yep.
more.
So he was still able to, escape the task of doing it by himself. But we see here a better replacement behavior of asking for help. So, looking at this, in that first example, we don't want to see him maybe complaining, oh, it's too hard, or pushing the towels on the floor. That's not great. But like you said, it might be a skill deficit, and it is just physically maybe too hard for them, and they don't know how to do it by themselves. And that's okay. And so while we teach them that skill, we also need to make sure we teach that replacement behavior. So we see it's functionally equivalent. It's getting him the same thing. So instead of Michael having to say it's too hard and pushing the towels on the floor, he can just ask for help, and he's getting that same consequence. So this is, once we know that function, we can give them maybe that quick and easy, more appropriate behavior to engage in, while we eventually teach them to be more independent. Like it was stated, maybe folding towels is a skill deficit, and we need to teach him more so he's more confident and able to do it on his own a little bit more easily. But in the meantime, we don't want him to just keep pushing over towels. We want him to do something a little bit more appropriate that everyone else is going to respond the same way to, that still gets him out of doing it by himself.
Yeah, and that can be hard for us, as teachers to grab sometimes, because it's like, I don't want to help him. I want him to do it by himself. I know he can do it. But in the moment, you just, hey, asking for help is way better than him throwing those towels in this moment. We will work toward him being more independent or doing more, but in the moment, this is better.
Okay. So reinforcement. Has anyone heard, or maybe said, that's also okay, any of these things on the screen? Reinforcement doesn't work. He knows better. I shouldn't have to bribe him. She shouldn't need reinforcement for doing something she's supposed to do. I mean, I'm a BCBA and I know I've got it, so everyone has, and that's okay. But none of them are true. So reinforcement isn't bribery. We get paid to come to work. That's our reinforcement. I'm not going to go to work for free. Most people won't. We do maybe some little things for free, for sure. But long-term, I'm not going to come if there's not some reinforcement at the end. And we're all going to be motivated by something. Money, social attention, getting time off, getting out of a task.
Praise that we get from our superiors telling us we're doing a good job.
Yeah. So with some of our, students, it might be that we have to start out with something a little bit more tangible, like some edibles or things to earn. But we want to teach them that concept of money, or tokens. Has anyone used like a token board before and stuff? Yeah, probably should have asked too what everyone's kind of like profession is. And
are you all
everything.
Teachers? You're at Voc Rehab? What are you?
Voc Rehab.
Okay.
Okay.
Teacher. Okay.
So yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So token board's probably a word that's thrown around a lot. It's money. It's something that's arbitrary at first, but it's paired with something and we know that we want it. If someone, tries to reinforce my behavior with money, with US dollars, I'm going to take it. That means something to me. If someone tries to give me like Canadian money, that means nothing to me. I'm not going to Canada tomorrow, so I'm not going to use this. I don't need it. So when we're using those token boards, we might need to start off a little bit with some of those tangibles and edibles and things that kids really like. But just want to make that note that it's not something that needs to be lasting. Sometimes we hear, I don't want to reinforce, I don't want to give them an M&M every time they do something good. Don't have to. It might need to start there for some students, but the goal is to always fade it back. And that's when it comes into play. It's really important to have those plans in place of fading it back.
And that's why too, you pair those tangible items with your social praise. Some of our kids, they might not care about social praise, but when we pair it, hey, here is your token. You did such a great job. That was awesome. I'm pairing that social praise with that so that they learn that, hey, that social praise is a good thing. That's something I want to work for too. And that's something that's free that we all like.
Mhm. So what can we use as reinforcers? This is very small, sorry, but there's a lot of different things. So there's those primary reinforcers like we were talking about, the food and drink. Buying a cookie for a child who follows instruction during a shopping trip. So reinforcement is used again with everybody. It's not something that is, special for kids with developmental disabilities or just with autism or anything like that. Reinforcers happen all the time for every behavior that increases. Like Kelly said, social reinforcers, hugs, high fives, praise, telling your child that you're proud of how he behaved at the store. That could be a different type of reinforcer for your child at that time. Tangibles, favorite toys, activities and privileges. Hey, after you did such a great job at the store today, do you want to go to the park later? And like we said, tokens. So if you kind of look, the tangible reinforcers and primary reinforcers like the food, those are things that can happen more immediately. Activities, privileges, and tokens, those are a lot more delayed. We don't get paid every single day to come to work. At the end of the day, we have to wait for a couple weeks. We can handle that now. A kindergarten might not be able to. We can't tell them maybe, hey, you have to wait 2 weeks before you get your sticker. That's probably not going to fly. So really want to make sure that all of that stuff really holds value and it's as immediate as possible. We'll go through a little bit of that as well.
And that it's individual, that's meaningful for that person.
Yeah.
And when I did ABA, and just to make this a little bit more project search related, because not that this is totally good, but you got to think about the environment that you're in. I always used to do like preference assessments to see what people are drawn to, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And
exactly.
And even, with these being older people that we're working with, like teenagers, if they have language, you just having a conversation and finding out what those things that they really like are, use that to your advantage for sure.
Yeah.
You're ahead of the game.
Yay.
Yeah.
So how do we know what reinforcers are going to work for our students or our friends or just coworkers? Like Dan just said, you can just ask them, what do they like? What don't they like? Talk with others who know the student well, teachers, caregivers, again, just another reason why it's so important to collaborate. We want to collaborate. There's no point in reinventing that wheel and just getting to know that, student from the very beginning when people have been working with them for 18 plus years. Those people have a lot of information and they are great resources. For maybe some of the students that, aren't as vocal or it's a little bit harder for them to kind of come up spontaneously with what they like, or maybe they're just a little shy or they can't think of something on the spot. Presenting things maybe one at a time or possible choices to see, hey, if I offer this kid, like some, like a video game or an iPad, which one is he going to choose? Or if I say, hey, do you like the movies or the park better? Just those like kind of simple questions to kind of get them going. And like we said, it can be, vocal choices, or it can be pictures, it could be items, but just kind of using that information to see what do they gravitate towards.
And especially even with some of our kids with autism, they might have just learned to say, when we say, what do you like, or what do you want to, earn, they might just have learned to say the computer. And like, but really, if you gave them those two choices, like Christy just said, they might pick something else every time. So it is important to, even if they are vocal, go ahead and give them those options and expose them to new things. If we don't take those opportunities to expand those leisure skills, that's when we get, our adults who are only into one thing and don't know how to expand. And that's where, again, problem behavior comes, so it's so important to expand those leisure skills and take the time to teach those things, because you might never know, like you might stumble upon, a great new activity that they love that they would have never known. So,
yeah. And then just simply, watching the student during their free time. Are they like, playing with trains all the time? Are they watching YouTube? a lot? Are they talking about it? Listening to see what they're talking to their friends about, maybe what they're looking at when they're not paying attention to you or something, looking and just observing what they're doing can be really helpful.
And they could also, like, one other thing that I was thinking is, like, with our people, if, so say one of them, like, really did like that praise or whatever, we, or whoever the instructor, could go to the, different departments and be like, okay, this person really enjoys getting this, positive praise when he or she does this, you know what I mean? Do you, you know what I mean? Just because at least the person may do it, but you gotta also remember that, good job is pretty big. You want them to be more specific as far as what they're praising them for, but, it could be as simple as that. Some people just like that praise to feel good and wanted. So, and I've seen that across the board on project search sites, just that praise and feeling important and knowing that they're doing a job that a lot of people thought that they would be able to do is reinforcement in and of itself.
And you can see their proud faces.
Absolutely.
And
So just to kind of highlight, things that are reinforcing, maybe like we were talking about, we might think that things are being reinforcing, but if that behavior isn't increasing, that means what we're using as a consequence is not reinforcing. So again,
so you're using the good job, okay, I came in on time and you told me good job, but now I keep coming in late. Good job didn't work for me.
No. It has to be contingent. So that positive behavior that we want to see increase has to occur. So if, the good job or a high five or a conversation is a reinforcer for doing something positive, but I'm also giving them that same type of social attention when there's a problem behavior, it's not going to be as meaningful anymore. So we really want to make sure it's actually contingent on the behavior that we're looking for occurring. It needs to vary. Like Kelly was saying, it's really important for people to have a variety of leisure skills and interests just to, keep them motivated. I like to watch TV, but if I did it for 3 hours every day, I'm going to get sick of it. And I'm going to need something else to, motivate me to do something else. And they are going to be ever changing. Like what I liked yesterday, I might not like today. What I liked an hour ago, I might not want more of. So, I just had lunch. If someone, offered me, some dessert or another sandwich to go do something, I might not be as motivated to engage in that behavior anymore because I'm full. I don't need that. It's not motivating at that moment. And so it's really going to change. It can change constantly. So it's really important that we always kind of ask our students, what their interests are. And like Diane said, those preference assessments are really important. It has to be immediate initially. So like we were saying, if we gave a kindergartner a sticker on Friday for something that they did on Monday, not going to happen. If Michael, that example of doing laundry and folding towels, if he folded towels by himself independently on Monday, if I waited even to the next day to say, hey, you did such a great job folding those towels for the first time, do you want to play some video games? He might have already forgotten about it. Or in that meantime, he might have thrown 4 other things. And now we're accidentally maybe reinforcing the throwing of other things. And he's totally forgotten about the towels. He's not even thinking about that. So we want it to be as immediate as possible. Now, once Michael is able to fold those towels 5 days in a row and getting a video game after every time, maybe the next week he has to fold those towels by himself 2 days in a row, and then 4 days in a row, and then 2 weeks in a row before he earns that stuff. But it has to be immediate initially to really make sure that person knows what is being reinforced. Like Kelly was saying, we want to pair it with behavior-specific praise. That's how those positive statements become reinforcing. We don't, Kelly's daughter, 6 months ago when she was like, great job, or if she said good job, she'd be like, I don't know what that means. But now she sees that excitement and she knows that great job means something good and something good's coming because it's paired together. And then we want it to be behavior specific. So if we told Michael, hey, good job, here's your video game. What does that mean? Does that mean good job standing here? Good job following my schedule? good job not throwing things. We want to say, hey, I loved how you folded your laundry by yourself and you didn't even ask for help. That was great. Do you want to play your video game, or do you want to have some time at like the park to take a walk? So really being super specific so people know what they're being reinforced for. Age appropriate. Some of our, students might have, different interests, and we don't want to necessarily say, if they do like things that are maybe not as functional or not age appropriate, we don't want to completely take those away if they're their only things, but we really want to work towards making things as age appropriate as possible. Like we said earlier, fading those quickly and just making sure that the quantity and quality match that behavior. So if he folded that towel for the first time by himself, he should get to play that video game for a long time. If it was, if I only gave him maybe a minute to play on that video game after folding a stack of towels this big by himself, he might be like, that's not worth it. I'd rather just ask for help and you do it for me. So we really want to make sure it matches.
Even a thing, like I've come to realize, and I think on a different sites, myself or managers or whatever, just say, thank you for helping me with this task. Like, you just made my life so much easier, you know what I mean? And that's just, that person knows their value in that moment.
Yep.
And it's that simple, you don't necessarily have to give them something tangible.
Yeah.
But they just feel valuable, especially in this setting, because they're in hospitals, they're not just, in just basic jobs, they're doing hard work. So to know that they're part of the team in and of itself.
Yeah. And even just, for us or work, like it goes a long way when supervisors or even your coworkers and stuff thank you for things and are very specific in what you're doing. That goes a long way. So again, these are things that can and should be used, with everyone.
Yes.
And it's free. Yeah. You don't have to buy anything.
Yeah.
You're about an hour. Did you guys want to take a little break right now?
Yeah, I think we can.
We can take a little break, and this is just a little slide, just kind of comparing that reinforcement and bribery. So
when we come back, we'll move
then
on to the hazards and some of those strategies that you guys can use. So we're gonna start back up. And so we're just gonna take some of the stuff we reviewed, and now we're gonna try to give you guys some strategies that you can actually use with your students. So, when Christy was talking about the reinforcement, that all kind of leads into pairing and pairing yourself with those fun, tangible items and that positive praise. Like you want to be the chocolate chip cookie. You want to be the fun reason why these kids come and hang out with you and, why they want to be there. We have to pair to build the rapport with our people so that they want to learn from us. I'm sure you guys have all experienced it. When you have a good relationship with a student, they are willing to learn, they are willing to work. It is essential for good teaching. If you have a negative relationship, you're not going to get very far. Even with coworkers, if you have a good relationship with coworkers, they're going to do more with you. They're going to be more willing to cover for you or help you out or
collaborate.
Yes, exactly. But if you don't pair and build those relationships, you're going to have a much more difficult time. So how can you start pairing? When you get a new student, you can interact with them without placing demands. And one thing to think about is a demand for me, again, could be very different for you. A demand for a student with autism might be having to come up and say hi to a bunch of strangers. That can be so intimidating. And while that might not seem like a big deal to you or I, that might be a huge demand that you just asked this kid to do the most aversive thing he could even imagine. So that's not really pairing. You want to set yourself up for success. So make activities fun because you're a part of them. Even if your student likes to go for a walk, maybe they like to do it more when you're there because you walk a different way or show them something cool or talk about whatever or play your music. It's more fun because you're there. And when you're pairing, you can provide the student with reinforcement. So now we're going to talk about some things that we want you to avoid. So these are hazards. These are come from this great training called Positively Motivating Others. So these are things that all of us do in our real life. You will catch yourself doing them now. And it's just important to be aware that you're doing them and try to catch yourself and do better next time. There are hazards that I definitely use at home, and then there's some that I might use at work, and some I might use both, and some I use more than others. So the key here is to just take it in strides. Oh, yes, I definitely do that. Just be aware and try to do better next time. So we'll go through some more examples of each one, but just really quick. So the hazards are questioning, arguing, sarcasm, force, threats, criticism, despair, logic, taking away, telling on them to others, one-upsmanship, and silent treatment. So these are all things that we want to avoid. So questioning, this is asking questions that there's no good answer to. So did you really just do that? Are you late again? These are questions that are just setting you up to have a negative interaction with someone. Does this dress make me look fat? You know, there's no good answers to some of these things, and it's a trap, right? Did you really just say that? Are you really not have your homework again? You are making someone either having to lie to you or not answer you. It's just not a great thing to do, and you want to try to avoid it. Arguing. So going back and forth, attempting to force someone to agree with you. We all know that that really doesn't work. You might not do that with your students as much. I definitely do that with my husband sometimes. I'm not gonna lie, but it doesn't work, right? When you're both upset, it never works. Sarcasm. So sarcasm, I definitely use when I think I'm being funny, and with my friends, but it's not something that I would use when I'm building a relationship with a new coworker or a new student, right? I might, once I get to know you, say, okay, this person understands my sarcasm. I think that's okay. But especially for a student with autism or a developmental delay, they might not get what you're saying and think you're just being rude. And, it just isn't going to go over well. So, using words that mean the opposite. Oh, great job. It's just mean. We don't want to talk to our students like that. Force. So using physical or non-physical strength or power. I'm the mom, I'm the teacher, you need to do this because I told you to do it. How often does that work? No, not very often. Or if your boss comes and tells you, you need to do this because I told you to do it. You're not excited about doing that task, right? Like that does not set you up for, cool, I'm really motivated to go work on that project. Not really. Force is something you want to avoid. Threats. So warning someone that something bad is going to happen. Most of the time, we don't follow through with our threats. I always think of the mom who has packed up her whole van and they're going to the beach and the kids are fighting and she says, I'm going to turn this van around. No, you're not, because mom wants to go to the beach and the kids know that mom isn't going to turn the van around. So those threats don't work. They just take meaning away from your words, right? When my kids threatened not to talk to me for the rest of the day, it's funny. It's funny because it's not going to happen. So criticism, making critical comments of disapproval. So you can't really see it, but this says criticism versus feedback. Criticism is different than feedback. Criticism is you're being critical, you're being rude. This is just horrible work. I can't believe you turned this into me. You're not helping or empowering them or giving them any positive feedback to grow from. Despair. So making someone feel sorry for you. I have had the worst day. I'm so busy. I need you to just go do your work right now. I can't deal with this. Please just go do your work. Or, oh, I'm just, please feel sorry for me. You might get someone to do something for you, but they're not doing it because they want to, right? They're doing it because you look pathetic or, they're just like, okay, this lady needs a break, I guess. It's not a great way to build a relationship. Logic. So we would always say this one to my dad. He was the Energizer Bunny because he would just repeat the same thing over and over and over and over again. And we do this sometimes with our kids, right? When we know that they know the rule. The rule is you come in and you hang up your backpack. I don't need to explain that to them 100 times or pull them to the side and have a big long conversation about it. If I know that they know that rule, we don't need to talk about it again. It's already there. We don't need to be that broken record. Taking away. So taking something away that someone has or likes immediately after a problem behavior happens. So we see this, and it says with no agreement prior. We see this a lot at the schools. Sometimes teachers will take away recess and just out of nowhere. Oh, you came in late, no recess for you. Or you hit somebody, no recess for you. You now are just the person that took away something that they really like. So again, when you go back to pairing and thinking about building relationships, taking something away is not going to be a great way to do that. I mean, if I walked up to Diane and just took her drink away, hey, you came in late, I don't appreciate that, I'm taking your drink. She would be like, what the heck? I'm not,
Yeah.
it's not a great thing to do. Now it's different. If we had an agreement that, hey, I need you to bring your homework in and then you can earn extra recess time or whatever. And if you don't bring your homework in, you won't be able to go out for recess. I mean, recess isn't a great example because we really should never take away recess. But if you have an agreement prior, that's different. But just taking something away from someone is really inappropriate and rude, and you would never want that to happen to you. One-upsmanship. This one, I feel like you probably see more like maybe with coworkers. You hear the person who, my caseload, if I've got 50 kids on my caseload, they've got 100. Or I've got 3 IEPs today, they've got 7. You don't want to be the one-upper because I'm sure you found that you end up avoiding those people. You don't really want to be around that person that's always saying all those things. And then the silent treatment, just ignoring someone for an uncomfortably long period of time. It's one thing to take a break and come back, but to ignore someone for a long period of time can be very hurtful. And, we were just talking on the break about children in foster care, and you don't know what people have gone through. So ignoring someone can be very painful and hurtful, and you really have to think about that and what kind of impact that could have on someone. So these are all of our hazards that we want to avoid and that we're never, ever going to do ever again, right? So that obviously that's not going to happen, but just be aware of them. This is one of the things I think that we had on a handout. Okay, so the reason we don't want to use the hazards is because they will age you. People will avoid you, they will want to get even with you, or they will escape you. So others will just want to avoid you completely. They won't want to be around you. Some of our kids might get even with us. This book says, happy kids don't punch you in the face. Some of our kids might try to get even with us, or escape or withdraw. Using those hazards, it provides tons of attention for negative behavior, right? And it teaches others to act in that way to others. So we don't need that. And it really causes kids to lose trust in you, which ultimately we're trying to build a relationship so that we can teach them skills to go be independent, right? And so if we're using these hazards, we're not creating that relationship at all. So let's just practice real quick. Just think of 2 to 3 hazards that either you have used or that you've seen someone use recently, and try to identify which hazard it was. I think this is on the handout that we sent out, but you can, if you want to expand on it, you can think about like, how did you or that person feel? And what is something that you could have done differently? So I'll pull them all up here just so you guys can kind of look at them. And just maybe think of a couple and then we'll share a couple examples. Do you guys have any that you want to share?
I mean, I've definitely argued, like, no
Yeah.
doubt that and it's hard, especially when you're working with adults that they're the same size as you and everything like that, but yeah, and I've gone on and I'm like, this isn't getting through, and I'm fully aware of it, but I'm all up in my head. And same with sarcasm, because that's just generally the person that I am.
Yeah. Well, like I said, sarcasm can be a it depends how you're using it.
I found with the adults, like, I know who I can be like sarcastic and they
Right.
get it, and then I know the ones where I'm like, we're gonna be just straightforward and everything, they don't enjoy it as much, so.
Right,
And
right.
sometimes
But those
you
are the two for
will,
sure.
yeah, and sometimes you'll know right away who you can engage in some of these, things with, because you've already built that relationship either over time or just within, a little while. I was probably sarcastic when I was up here.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but I probably
Teachers
was.
are-
But
Like, you just, we're all human too, like, we've
Yep.
all been in
Yeah.
those situations where a kid is just like, I can't anymore, like, I'm gonna argue, like, just because, it
Yeah.
just gets difficult sometimes, so.
Yeah.
You wanna try to avoid it as much as you possibly can, but we all are human.
We
so
are.
that's how-
And
Yeah.
becoming kind of fluent with them and recognizing them also gives you a nice little signal to yourself of when you maybe need to step away.
Mhm.
Everything that you guys do can be people
Very
get
stressful.
very stressful.
yeah.
People are going to get burnt out, and that's okay. And to really, make sure that we keep very, strong and effective people, in this field, we have to make sure that we recognize our own behavior. So knowing these hazards, if I'm getting to a point where I think I'm going to argue or I'm, asking those questions and they have no good answers to, that probably means that I need to maybe tap in Kelly and say, I need a little break. Can you go hang out with this kid for a second, or this coworker,
There
or
is
someone
no
else, just like I
shame in
need to
that at
step
all.
away.
Yes, please. I mean,
We always said, that you're in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that's a great, I love that example too, because it's very succinct and to the point. You don't need to, kind of complain or even not take away that attention from like the student or the other person. It's just like a quick little signal of like, I'm out, I'll be back.
And that is totally good and what you need to do.
Yeah.
One I forgot to talk about was telling on them to others. So that is a really important one because it's about embarrassing someone by telling another person what they did. So, you guys too, it's important for you to collaborate and, you might have to go back and tell the teacher how the student's day was or their caregiver, what happened. But you can do that in a respectful manner. I can't tell you how many times, we've walked into classrooms and, oh, you got to get this kid and take him. And he's just had the worst day ever, and he can hear, all the other kids can hear. And
He knows that
Oh,
tone in
how-
your voice.
yeah. And I know that's not a bad teacher and they weren't trying to be mean when they're saying that, but it's just one of those hazards that you gotta, be cognizant of. And, it's okay to come pull me aside and say, Christy is having a really rough day, just to give you a heads up, but you can do it in a respectful way.
Does anyone online have anything to share?
Does anyone online want to share any examples that they have?
Yeah, one that really grabbed me, it grabbed me because I obviously do this logic, because it just makes sense. I'm going to say it till you get it. You know what I'm saying? And not that I do it all the time. I'm thinking about my daughter also, but, I mean, I get how it can be a downer for the person hearing it, but I'm thinking, okay, if I say it enough, eventually you'll get it. And sometimes they already get it. It's just, the process of getting it, I guess. So I don't know.
Definitely.
Yep. And it kind of goes back to maybe those functions or reinforcement. Maybe someone knows if I don't do this and they keep telling me, that means it delays the task that I have to do. I avoid it. The bell rings and now I get out of it. Our kids and coworkers and people, they're very smart. They, so that, could be a reason. So kind of going back to maybe those quick ABCs or thinking, why are they doing this? Or maybe how can I change the consequence and make it, provide some kind of reinforcement.
Right.
So
Like with your children, why aren't they putting their stuff away? Well, what could I do that would be more motivating for them to want to put their stuff away? Go ahead, Debbie.
Yes, I know that I hear a lot of some of my coworkers, because I'm not going to admit to this, say, "Well, I already have my diploma. I already have my high school diploma, so that's why," or something like that. Just kind of explaining that they need to be motivated because you don't.
Right.
And it's, to me, when you listen to when they say it, it may sound kind of joking, but you're kind of implying that if they don't straighten up, they might not get theirs.
Right.
And that is kind of not nice when
Right.
you hear it that way.
Right.
You
And
know.
yeah, and they probably wouldn't say that to like a coworker, I wouldn't say anything like that, but why is it okay to say it to a student? That's a great example.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you guys for participating. Does anyone else have anything?
I've done the silent treatment too, but that's only because that was mainly at the beginning before it really dawned on me that like you ignore the behavior, not the person as
Yeah.
always, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
great
you can
point.
still be totally going and doing a bunch of things, you're just ignoring that one particular behavior,
Yeah.
and that took a little bit for me to grasp on too, because
That's
you
a
just
great
kind of want
point.
to turn your back on that person and ignore them as a whole,
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's.
Yeah, Diane said, just to make sure everybody here, you want to ignore maybe their inappropriate behavior, but you don't have to ignore them as a person. That's important. Yes. Thank you guys. So our next strategy we're going to talk about is building those connections. So again, this is from the Positively Motivating Others course, which I will have a link to at the end. It's a great course. It can be like a 7-hour to like a 10-hour course. It's very interactive, but it's used for people, from working in sales and car dealerships to teachers to foster care. It's just a great tool. So these are just some strategies that when you are working with new students or adults that you can try. So being physically close, getting close to someone. I know right now it's COVID, where you might have to have your space, but you still can orient your body toward them and, show that you're interested. Using appropriate facial expressions, tone of voice, and body language. So, I think Diane brought up some good examples of, saying good job. And, I can say good work, nice job, good work. But it's how I say it. Hey, you did so awesome today. I'm so proud of you. I mean, that means so much more than me just saying, yep, good job, blah, blah, blah. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And pairing your facial expressions with that. Asking open-ended positive questions. So we'll go over some examples of this, but even if someone comes in and they're having a rough day, you can ask some positive questions. You don't need to fix their problem, but you can try to talk to them and build a connection there. And then making empathy statements. So again, when someone comes in, sounds like you're really frustrated. Sounds like you're having a really rough day. You must be really stressed out about that. Those are just good statements to make to kind of get on their level and get that conversation going. And as always, you want to avoid hazards. You don't want to use any of those hazards that we went into. So really quick, we're going to do a quick example. Christy and I will kind of act it out for this whole building connections here. So please don't judge us on our acting skills.
And as we do it too, kind of think about maybe the ABCs of the instructor. So we want to look at the instructor's behavior, which is going to be Kelly. So again, a little bit different. So when we're pairing and building connections, and a lot of, when we're teaching, it's on us. It's on the adult and the instructor in the room. And so that we need to maybe change and alter our behavior to, get the expected behavior that we want to see out of the student or the coworker. And so we're going to kind of do a little bit differently. So think about the behavior of the instructor, and that'll be Kelly. Okay.
All right, so we're going to do 2 examples. Our first one will be not a great way to handle things. And then our second one, we'll try to be using some of these building connection strategies. All right, so I'm maybe like a social worker or a vocational person, and my student is, they're coming in to fill out some paperwork with me, okay? So that's the scenario. All right, so, oh my gosh, I'm still waiting on this student. She's taking forever. She finally just got here. I gotta go. I'll talk to you later. Hey, what's the deal? You're late again?
Yeah, I had to run for the darn bus.
Well, you're really supposed to plan your day so that you have plenty of time to get here to the bus.
Well, I'm not perfect like you.
I'm not perfect. I just make sure I plan ahead like I'm supposed to.
Whatever. This is lame. I'm out of here.
Okay. So what were some of my behaviors? Were there any hazards? that you guys saw?
Boys.
What's that?
My vote.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Hello attitude.
Hello attitude, yes.
Great.
Okay.
So objective. How
Yeah, so she said tone of voice.
Yes.
Yes, good. Tone of voice, what else?
Your body language.
So I did a really good job, right? What about my body language? Like, yeah, I was closed off. I kind of kept looking at my stuff here. I didn't really turn to her at all.
Was there an eye roll? I don't know. I felt
Probably.
No.
What about telling on them to others?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were comparing to yourself, like you almost like a pity party for yourself, like,
Yeah.
I got all
Mhm.
this stuff to do, why aren't you on time? And
Right.
you made them feel bad as soon as they, whoever it was came in.
Yeah, yeah. And I told on, I'm just gonna write hazards. I told on whoever I was on the phone, I was like, my students finally got here. She's late. I mean, they shouldn't be hearing that, right? So what was the antecedent to all of this? What happened before she was late? Yeah, okay, so my student got here late. And then what was the consequence to all of this nastiness that I did?
She left.
Yeah,
Wasn't having it. Not worth it. Not reinforcing, wasn't
So-
fun.
so did we have a productive session?
No,
No,
not at all.
right? She didn't learn anything, and is she gonna be excited to come back and see me next time? Probably not. Okay, so we're gonna try the same scenario again, and we are gonna try to use some of these building connection strategies. I'm gonna try to be physically close, use appropriate facial expression, tone of voice, and try to ask some open-ended positive questions and make some empathy statements. And I'm gonna try to avoid those hazards. Okay, so same situation. I'm on the phone here. I've got to run my clients here. Hey, Christy, how's it going?
Oh, I had to run for the darn bus again.
Oh, that stinks. You must have been really stressed out about getting there on time.
Yeah, I was, and I had to run forever.
Well, I'm really glad you made it here today. Did you get a chance to look over the jobs that I sent you?
No, I've been busy.
Well, guess what? We can look over them now. I think you'll really like this one here on page 2.
Oh, yeah, that does sound pretty cool.
Okay, awesome. Let's get started on the application. Okay, so if we looked at the situation here, the A was the same, right? She still came in late. What changed with my behavior? Did I use any of those hazards? I tried to avoid them.
Your body language is better, your tone of
Tone of voice
voice.
is a lot better, yeah.
Yeah, I patted her on the shoulder,
Yes.
and I turned toward her with my body. And she said, tone of voice. I mean, I sounded genuinely interested. So I don't know, I made an empathy statement when I said, you must have been really stressed out. Yeah. I mean, that is stressful. Gosh, I can't imagine having to run for the bus. That would not be pretty if I had to do that. So gosh, that must have been really stressful. I mean, I'm not trying to fix anything or tell her how to do it better next time or how to not be late again. I'm just, empathizing with her, like, that sucks. You had to run for the bus. I'm sorry, man.
And she didn't say too, oh, I remember that time I had to run. We're avoiding those eyes. It's just, that stinks. That sounds really hard and awful.
Yeah. And then, so I did all those good things, and the consequence is we got to have our session, right? She found a job that she really did like, and we got to work on our application. So the only thing that changed here was me as the teacher. And I mean, she kind of had an attitude still through that, and I just moved on. And, and it might have taken longer in real life. And sometimes that can be hard to have a student talking to you like that, for sure. But look, we had a successful session versus having nothing. So, and that's my job as her teacher. So that's just a kind of a good example of, how using some of these strategies can help. And you could totally do that with other adults that you're working with. They might not come in quite like that, but
You never know.
you never know, right? We could practice some empathy statements if you guys want. I don't know. How are we on time, Diane?
2:30.
Well, let's just move on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can always come back to
Yeah.
it if everyone's still excited.
okay. All right. Okay, so to get into our teaching strategies, we want to talk about making task analyses and behavior skills training. Has anyone ever heard of a task analysis? Okay. And for those of you that haven't heard that phrase, I'm sure you've seen them. You just didn't know that technical term.
Yeah.
And
And we, just to, make a point too, we started with that, building connections and pairing and learning about the student before we get into these teaching strategies. So before you can really start teaching a skill and placing those demands, all of that pairing and that building connection has to kind of come first. So that's really important to remember once you take these strategies, back. A lot of the students you work with, I'm sure you already have those relationships with. So maybe that pairing and building that connection, you might just start out your session with that or your day for maybe 5 minutes even. But it doesn't hurt to go back to that pairing and building that connection and using those strategies just for a few minutes, even every day, before you go into the teaching and the demands.
So task analysis is really just the process of taking a complex skill or task and breaking it into smaller steps. So this is just a really great visual because you can see this ladder here. They're the same size, but this one is broken into smaller rungs. I think that's the right word for them. And so that person was able to make it up. This one is still down here at the bottom because they can't even reach that top. So, and this is applicable to probably all the skills you guys work on. They're complex skills. They take, they take a bunch of smaller tasks and they're all rolled into one, and they might seem really overwhelming at first, but you can tell that a lot of our kids can learn how to do them. They just need to be taught correctly.
The task analysis are regular, you see them a lot. on
I
project
figured,
sets,
yeah.
A lot.
So this will be great because this will also kind of show you guys how to maybe collect some data on them and use them as goals and monitor progress. It helps make the skill more achievable by breaking it down. It doesn't seem like such a big thing. Like, I am never going to be able to learn how to, make this lasagna by myself. But if I break it down into these smaller steps, I might be able to go ahead and do that. It also helps us to identify the area of where the individual needs help. Maybe they don't need help with that whole huge process. They just need help on one small step. So we can help them there. And these will help you identify that small step. And again, it helps us to measure the progress using like a percentage. So it'll help you with your data collection. I know everybody loves data collection.
Yeah. And it's something too that is just around us all the time. We were talking on the way here, and an example that came to me in like real life is like learning maybe like a dance routine. I was just thinking about when I was like younger, because I was watching videos of like my dance routines that were like 5 minutes long. And, I wasn't taught that routine, that 5 minutes from start to finish right away. It was really broken down into steps. And once I was really good, maybe at that first minute, I was never very good. But once they thought I was like good at that first minute, then they taught us the next step. So task analyses are all around us too. Kelly mentioned a recipe, so we'll get into examples, but just know too, again, these are strategies that are not just for our students with developmental disabilities or autism. They are things that we can utilize when we're working with coworkers and teaching them how to teach too.
Yep. Yeah. So the first step to utilize one of these would be to identify the task that you are wanting to work on. Pick a skill that you teach frequently, kind of be thinking about that in your heads right now. And it really, really helps to run through that skill yourself in the order of which it's typically completed. Don't just assume, oh, I know how to do that, so I can teach someone how to do that. Running through it yourself, you will realize how many steps are actually in that. For toothbrushing, for example, do we have that in here? There can be like 30 steps to toothbrushing. You have to pull out your toothbrush. You have to pull out the toothpaste. You have to open the toothpaste. You have to squeeze the toothpaste onto the toothbrush. Then you have to put the lid back on. Then you have to take your toothbrush. There are so many steps just in brushing your teeth. That can be super overwhelming for our kids. But when you're developing one of these, it really helps for you to run through it yourself to remember all of those tiny steps. Because I can't tell you how many times I've tried to make one too, and I've forgotten a little step.
majority of the time, the skills trainers, if they can, they try to learn all the jobs prior to the interns
Yeah,
learning them,
that's
which is
great.
really helpful, because then they're not learning it at the same
Mhm.
time,
Yeah.
and then they can build these task
Yeah.
analysis
Yeah,
based on that.
and they can see which parts were harder for
Yeah.
them. Yeah, that's awesome. It also could be really helpful to have someone else run through that task that you've identified to see if it makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
so like
then-
I could give, sorry, like mine to Kelly, because I know she has all those skills. You know, she doesn't have any skill deficits of brushing her teeth. But if she was just reading that paper, she might realize, oh, you forgot to tell me to take off the cap. So, you know, giving it to someone that you know doesn't have any skill deficits with that task can be really helpful too.
Mhm. And then you're going to want to determine how you're going to teach the skill. Does it need to be broken down even more? Are there prerequisite skills that your student needs before they can even start on this that they don't have? Are all of the materials there and accessible? Will you start with the whole task? Like Christy said, you know, are you going to start with the whole routine? Are you going to start at the beginning of the routine or the end of the routine? There's so many different ways that you can do it. It should all just be dependent on your learner. And you definitely want to ensure that when you are developing that, you're developing it with your learner in mind. So if you've got a student, you know, in a wheelchair, when you're thinking about those materials, make sure they're not up super high. You know, have all that in mind. Think about it from their point of view, from their strengths, their needs, their current levels of performance. So we have a few different examples, and I think we have some links to them too at the end. These are kind of hard to see, but
Yeah, it was kind of more, and we'll go through a couple of them just to kind of show you. So this is a task analysis for cleaning a bathtub. And
it has
49 steps in there.
49.
Yeah, and it's really broken down to, you know, goes into the bathroom, opens the cupboard door, takes out the cleaner for the tub. So some students really need that completely broken down. And once you do break that down, you might see, okay, I can only teach maybe a chunk of this, or I might be able to cross it off, be like, okay, I know my student can go through half of this stuff. I'm going to kind of start in the middle. But it really just goes to show, like, a skill can be broken down into so many steps, and it's really just going to depend on that learner. If I gave learner A cleaning the bathtub, they might have the 49 steps, but my other learner for cleaning the bathtub, their task analysis might just be 12 because they have a lot of prerequisite skills and they just need some like visual reminders for some things. So it's just really important to kind of show there's never gonna be too many steps. There's always going to be more. So if you're having some, you know, troubles teaching a skill, go back to it and see how you can really break it down.
And
And
this-
this clearly it can be broken down into a lot.
And this isn't a list that you would necessarily give to your learner. This is
Right.
for you as the instructor.
Mhm.
You would use this to collect your data or to guide your teaching.
Right.
Here's another one for just drying plates, 16 steps of drying plates.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, so if you go back to the drying plates, the first two steps are washes your hands and dries your hands. That might be a prerequisite that I know that, you know, my student doesn't have. So I'm gonna teach those first. Or I might just do those first and then the skill of drying plates. So really bring it down to see what they need as a prerequisite skill and what they have and what they don't have.
Here's another one for stapling and folding papers. So it's just to show you that you could really do it with so many different activities and skills. It's a great way to collect data on activities that you might be like, there's no way I can target this. You can do it. We've done it for so many different things.
So this is just to show, like, when you are kind of making that data sheet, once you do make those steps and write those out, you kind of have your data sheet right there. You automatically have it. And this is just to kind of show sometimes, like we said, you might not be able to teach all of those 16 steps. If my learner doesn't have any of these, teaching all 16 of these at once is going to be really, really hard. So with my data sheets, what I like to do is maybe highlight the steps that I'm working on. Maybe I know my learner and I'm like, okay, I can teach maybe the first 3. That's what we're really going to target that I want her to learn. That's the one I'm going to take data with. Steps 4 through 16, I'm going to do for her so she can watch and get exposed to it so she can see the task from beginning to end. But I'm really only focusing on those 3. So highlighting, starring, things like that can be really helpful. But I think, you just really want to make sure that you go through it beginning to end.
Mhm.
Because sometimes those first 3 steps, if they were just by themselves, it'd be like, okay, I did this. What does it mean? What's the point of it? So we really want to make sure there's a purpose in that beginning and end. But it can be really helpful for that data collection if you mark those off. And to know, if a sub comes in or someone else is working with that student, they can look at that data sheet and say, oh, those are the only ones that are circled. That must be the only ones that she's working on.
And also not assuming that just certain things that they're able to do. Like I had a mom that we were talking about when I taught independent living classes, that she was saying that her son could make his own lunch. I'm like, okay, well, what does that look like? She's like, well, I lay everything out on the table and he does this and that. I'm like, what if he weren't there though? Like, what, like, could he do it? And the look on her face was like, well, I think so. So then we started, I was like, okay, well, let's test this, you know what I mean? So then when they went to the kitchen, he looked right at her, like, because he was waiting for her to put everything there on it. So
Yeah.
we built a task analysis starting from the very beginning,
Yeah, and breaking it into those steps, like Christy said too, it ensures that they're successful and they're not overwhelmed. Like they're not, oh my gosh, I can't do all 16 of these brand new things. Okay, you don't have to. You only have to do the first 3.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the rest of them for you.
He had a bunch of them already, the skills. He
Yeah.
didn't have that initial part of it.
Yeah.
So once he gets that initial part, he's good to go.
Yep, that's right.
Built a lot.
So that's right. It can show you where to focus and where to start. I like this example because we see this picture all the time in restaurants, right? I mean, we have to have this for adults that are,
Especially now.
yeah, like we need to be taught how to wash our hands. So, this is just a simple one for washing hands and another data sheet. So they've got the date here and a plus or a minus if the student was able to do just that part. They were able to turn on the water independently, they get a plus. If they needed help, they would get a minus. And then at the bottom, that could be your percentage. And there you have your data for your progress monitoring or your present levels.
Yep, IEP goal, anything. Yep.
This was just an example of making a sandwich. Kind of like Diane said, the first subtask for one student, it might just be all these: gather ingredients, assemble sandwich, serve sandwich. Your other learner might need all this broken down. They might need to know that they have to choose the jelly, choose the peanut butter, choose the bread, and where to choose it from. And then they might need to toast the bread, spread the peanut butter and jelly all the way to the edge, spread the jelly, put the pieces together, cut it in half, put it on a plate, and then eat it. I think we have a video for this one. I don't know if it'll play. We can try it.
Try. So this video is a good example of why it's so important to really be very specific when you are writing a task analysis.
You're not making any sense. Zari ruined it on purpose.
You know what? I'm hungry. I could really go for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Do you guys think you can write down some instructions and teach me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Yeah. I'm done.
Step 1. Get 2 pieces of bread out. Got 'em. Get a butter knife and get some PB. Take 1 piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife.
No, Dad, with the peanut butter.
I'm just doing what it says. It says take 1 piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife.
Hold on.
Get some jelly, rub it on the other half of the bread.
No, Dad, open the jelly.
Well, it doesn't say to do that. Put the breads together on top of each other. Take a big bite. This doesn't taste like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Fail.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I had to make it extremely specific.
Oh, good. I'm starving. Take 2 pieces of white bread out of the bag. Take the lid off the jar of peanut butter. Get a butter knife and stick it inside of the peanut butter jar. With the knife, scoop a bit of peanut butter out of the...
That means like a lot.
A bit means a lot?
In my world.
All right. There we go.
Doing better than before though.
Open the jelly jar. Squeeze it onto the other piece of bread.
No.
Done. Closer. You guys think you can write down some instructions?
Okay.
So yeah, obviously a very extreme example. That's yeah.
She just said you suck when she said
I don't know.
Maybe.
Um,
Yeah.
But yeah, but it just goes to show you too why you want to act it out yourself to make sure you're not just
Mhm.
assuming anything. 'Cause
Yeah.
it might
Well,
not
she
work.
was doing really good until that jelly part,
She
like, and
did.
I was like.
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
that's all right.
Oopsie.
And to show too, using maybe subjective things like a bit of peanut butter or some peanut butter for maybe some of our students isn't enough. So we might need to say like, use green spoon, like fill up green spoon and, dump into bowl. If it's not peanut butter, but something else, like very specific to show how much, because some of those subjective words like a little bit or a lot or some just might not be specific enough for some students.
Does anybody have any questions? I saw there's a couple chat. It might be gold though.
Leah, are you there? Are there any questions in the chat?
No, I'm not seeing any right now.
Okay. Can you put down that again for me? Yeah. Okay. This is just another example. This is one we use a lot at school of just a morning routine. So this was a skill that a lot of our kids needed to learn, and a lot of teachers had a hard time, how do we track this and monitor progress on morning routine or unpacking? I mean, so we broke it down. So approaching the cubby, taking off their backpack, unzipping their backpack, taking out their folder, zipping their bag back up, hanging up their bag, putting their folder in the tray, sit down, start their morning work. So this was a skill that the student was only doing, 56% of that skill. So you could track data and show progress on that. So it's an important skill. It's significant that they be able to be independent, and it's a really quick, easy way to collect data. And even for a lot of these, we just do data once a week, and that you don't have to do it every day, even once a week, and it'll show progress. So we would ask if you guys try to pick a task that you do frequently or you have to teach frequently and come up with a quick task analysis. Just think about anything that you're teaching frequently and break it down into some steps and just see if you're able to come up with some of that. I think there was a data sheet on our handout that we have for those of you at home, or you could just use a piece of paper. We'll give you guys a couple minutes to do that. You guys need some paper or anything?
We can also, even share or think about too, like skills that have maybe been, you've had difficulty in the past teaching a student, or, just some examples of breaking down, or if you're having a hard time thinking about how to break down a certain skill, or just any other, comments or whatever.
I think we just call it to do list, but they are really this. They're really a task analysis with my 13-year-old who has ADHD, and he's ADHD to the max because she's on every box.
Yeah.
So I can't just tell her to clean their room,
Right.
because she walks in and she's like, I don't know what to do.
Right.
Where do I start? She's like, what do I do first? So it's literally, okay, pick your clothes up off the floor, put them in your hamper. If your hamper's full, wash your clothes. They've been doing their laundry since they were probably 10. So they know how to do their laundry.
Right.
So, but then you have to think, if I tell her to do her laundry, that's going to sidetrack her. We're going to forget the room. So we don't say do your laundry in that list. We just say, put them in your hamper.
Yeah.
Your hamper's full, start a pile next to it.
Good.
Because that happens. Her hamper gets full quite often. I don't know how one child wears so much clothes. But then, you just have to break it down. Make sure litter box is clean.
Yep.
Make sure the cat has food, because it's her cat. And it's, clean your desk, clean your dresser,
Yep.
But even that sometimes has to be broken down. I can't just say clean your dresser because it may look clean to her.
Mhm.
I have to be like, nothing but your lamp and your remotes on your dresser.
Right.
So
Mhm.
everything else needs to go through, and then some, and I'll go in and help her sometimes and say, she'll be like, I don't really do this. Well, is this trash or is this important?
Yeah.
Do we
Yeah.
keep it or do we trash it?
Right.
And if we keep it, why are we keeping it?
Yeah. Those
We're
are all
not just
great.
keeping it to keep it because we think we might need it one day.
Yeah.
There needs to be a specific reason that we're gonna need this in the future.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, if I can do that with her, she's calmer.
Yeah.
Instead of just stomping around being a typical 13-year-old
Mhm.
and being upset, you
Yeah.
know. But then with my 12-year-old, a lot of times I can just say, go clean your room.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, and that's
Yeah.
all she needs.
Yep. And
But with
everybody's so
my
different.
13-year-old, it's very, we've always done that. We found that very quickly. Breaking down tasks for her was much easier than just getting frustrated because she wasn't doing it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Good.
Because I mean, she would walk in, I mean, and I'm like, that. If I just say, oh, I need to clean the house, I
Mhm.
get
Oh,
overwhelmed.
yeah.
My husband's always like, make a list, which one do you want to start with?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I mean, and so she gets it honest. But I mean, that's just something we do with her that I have found. So not so much in my kids I work with,
Yeah.
in both rehab, but just in personal
Mhm.
situations, working with her is.
Mhm.
It's great that you defined it too for her, like what does a
Yeah.
clean
Yeah.
dresser look like? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Because again, what she thinks versus what you think. you know?
It's all clean to her.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know?
And even that skill of,
Yeah.
okay, why are we keeping this? I mean, some of our kids, like, I mean, even not of our kids, we become
Yeah.
hoarders and just
Well,
keep
she-
everything. And
She's very artistic, or she's very, very good at drawing, so I laugh and all the time they say, they say artistic people are very messy, and it's so true, because everything she could use in an art project later,
Mhm.
that's her mindset. So,
Yeah.
like, I'll find paper, I'm like, Mary Ellen, why did you- Mom, I'm gonna use that to make something.
Yeah.
You have 2 days.
Yeah.
Not making this up. But I mean, to her, there is a reason, so we have to really break down,
Right.
is there a reason? Is
Right.
this a real, I mean,
Mhm.
is this something you can never find again, that
Right.
we couldn't just
Yeah.
pull another piece of paper out of the school supply box?
Right.
And that's such a great example of a behavior and a skill that is kind of subjective. Have a lot of like private thoughts that go into that. And we can still break those down into a task analysis. If I'm
Mhm.
deciding if I want to keep this or not, like you said, when am I going to use it? How am I going to use it? When's the last time I used it?
Mhm.
Do I have anything else like this? Maybe those are things that come easy to some people and they can just run through those questions in their head when someone says, do I need this? And decide to keep it, but others can't, so that's a great example
Yeah.
where it's just kind of like a more subjective skill rather than, doing laundry or something like that. That was a great example.
Yeah. And it's socially significant and important.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any examples they want to share or anything that they've used this before in the past?
Or questions about data collection or maybe like how to kind of write this up or as like a goal.
All right. So now we're going to talk about behavior skills training. And this is just a tool that you can use how to teach some of these skills. I'll let Christy kind of go into this one.
So after you have that task analysis, like we said, we're going to decide how are we going to teach it. I broke down the steps of tying my shoe, but I can't maybe go through all of those steps at once to teach someone. Maybe, like you said, they don't have the fine motor skills. They don't have the prerequisites. They don't have the attention span. They don't have the motivation to do all of those steps. So I'm going to decide figure out how to teach that skill. So behavior skills training is just a method of instruction that we can use to teach a skill and any skill to any learner. And there's 4 steps to this. The first one is instruction, and we have modeling, rehearsal, and then feedback. So we'll go through each of those steps. So the first one with instruction, we're going to provide a description of the skill. Now, again, all of these steps are going to be a little bit different based on, that skill level of and skill set of your learner. If it's someone who just needs it broken down a little bit more, we might be able to explain, okay, we're going to go ahead and learn how to tie your shoe. It's going to be a lot of fun because then you'll get to go out to the park faster. So we have to get our shoes, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more maybe in the description. For other students, depending on their skill set, it might be a little shorter. So again, making sure that all of these steps are going to be still individualized to our learner. After we provide that instruction and like demand of what we're doing, we're then going to model it. I'm as the instructor going to demonstrate how to perform it. So if I decide to teach a skill and I'm only going to teach the first step, I might go ahead and model that step for them. I'm going to physically show them how to do it. And I might use some extra visuals that they're going to use as well. So with the hand washing, if I'm working on that task analysis and I'm going to model how to do those first couple steps of hand washing, of turning on the water, I might also model the visual as a reference, because that's always going to be there. That's something that's natural and a resource that they can use. So I might point up to the first step and then I might model it and do it.
I was just going to say about the modeling, I was able to go to the skills training day or skills assessment day for Project Search. And that was my first experience there, but they put me on a folding station and I just wasn't really prepared. But I noticed too, when I was modeling to fold, at first I was across the table from the student, which is like looking in a mirror, and they weren't seeing the same thing I was seeing, right, when I'm folding. So I had to come and stand on the same side of the table as the student. So that way, when I was modeling folding, he was seeing what I was seeing. So that was just kind of like eye-opening to me. Okay, I need to even make sure that our perspective is the same. If I'm expecting him to be seeing what I'm doing, that I'm not even looking at the same side as he is.
Yep, exactly. So after we model that, we're going to then have that rehearsal. We're going to want that learner, that student, to then practice it themselves and then do it. Like we said, it might just be that first step that they're working on. They might have a lot of prerequisites and they might be doing 5 out of the 10 steps. So if I model 5 out of the 10, they're going to do 5 out of the 10. So again, it just goes back to what's going to be individualized for the learner and what they're working on. And then the last step is feedback. We want to provide reinforcement and we want to provide corrections. So that feedback is telling that student that's the consequence. Is that consequence going to increase their behavior or decrease? We want it to increase it. So we want to provide that reinforcement, whether it's set up in the beginning of they get something tangible or they get that and that social praise or just that social praise. In addition to the reinforcement, we want to add those corrections, maybe those prompts to help them do it correctly so they can get that reinforcement. So those are those like 4 steps.
And just really quick too, this is a tool that we use not only with our students, but with staff. So if we're teaching, a new teacher or an assistant, maybe how to run a program, we're going to use the same exact strategy with them. So I don't know, like if you guys go in as job coaches or teachers and you're showing another adult how to work with your student, you might even want to use this with them, because that's a great way to show another adult how to do something and give them feedback and make sure that they're doing it correctly, because you don't want to just assume that they're going to teach the skill the same way you might. You might want to model it and observe it and give feedback.
Yeah. So now we're going to break them down a little bit more. So with instruction, we want to make sure that we're really describing the target of that appropriate behavior very specifically. So going back to when we were talking about the ABCs, if we don't know what behavior we're looking for or teaching, the student or a coworker definitely isn't going to. So we really want to make sure that it's very clearly defined. And again, that's where the task analysis comes in too. We know exactly what that student or that colleague is supposed to be doing. And again, we may be teaching the entire skill or just part of it, depending on that skill set. We want to be very specific in the instructions. We want to give instructions of behavior in the correct sequence based on how they occur. So if I'm giving the instructions of what we're doing, if I'm jumping out of order, that's going to be very, very confusing. So we want to make sure we're providing and practicing things in the correct sequence. So if I was going through this instruction and first I started with feedback and then I went back to instruction, that would be pretty confusing since the last slide had them in this order. So we want to make sure we're always going in the correct sequence. provide those instructions based on the level of the learner. So if possible, I don't know, another typo. On level learner, based on the level of the learner, have the learner repeat the instructions. So that can be one, just to know that that learner is paying attention. You know, sometimes we're not sure. Sometimes our kids might be looking off, but they are listening. And, you know, that's okay. They don't need to be staring at me in the eyes to like, for me to know they're listening. So this is just like kind of a nice way to kind of get that check in of, are they ready to learn? Are they ready? Are they motivated for that reinforcer that I've established? Do I have their attention? So make sure you have the learner's attention. Again, repeating those instructions is a great kind of natural way to do that. You can also simultaneously model the behavior when you are giving the instructions. So steps 1 and 2, that instruction and modeling, they might happen separately or they might co-occur. And that's again, just going to kind of depend on your learner. If I'm doing it with a colleague, because I'm transferring over student program, I might do those together because it's a little bit faster pace. I also might do it for a student because when I'm just talking to them, they're not attending as much. They're maybe more visual and they need that kind of model. So putting them together pairs the actions with my words. So this is kind of where, again, be flexible, know your learner, and decide if these can happen simultaneously or separate. And you might need to provide reinforcement for attending. It's going to always be okay to provide that reinforcement for those positive behaviors. Hey, thanks for listening. Are you ready? Like, I'm really excited about going to the park after we're done. Are you? So really making sure they know what they're earning at the end. Even if it's, hey, we're doing this, then you get to go home. Sometimes there's those natural reinforcers too, but make sure that's established and that you're reinforcing that attending. Then we have the modeling. So we want to model the correct behavior. And that's where, you know, it sounds very simple and obvious, but that's why it's so important to go through that task analysis and be as specific as possible. Different faucets, if we're learning how to wash our hands, different faucets have different ways to use them. So, you know, you might need to practice beforehand. I might want to practice only turning on the cold water, because if I model the hot and they model me too, they're not going to know to adjust it. So really going through and modeling that behavior you want to see. Again, may occur simultaneously as giving the instructions. And we want the learner to imitate the model behavior. So it's important that the learner has that imitation skill in their repertoire. So that's where the prerequisites come in. If I know my kid has a lot of fine motor deficits, I might work on those fine motor skills and collaborate with their OT or someone to make sure that they're ready for this, or how can I make it easier for them? Because if they physically just don't have that skill in their repertoire, I could break down that task analysis of washing hands as much as I want, but it's just going to be way too hard for them. It's not a matter of they won't do it because there's not enough reinforcement. It's just they can't do it because they don't have that prerequisite skill. And again, providing reinforcement for correctly modeling the behavior. It might not be as big as doing it by themselves, but that's where that behavior specific and social praise comes in. Then we have the rehearsal. So this is the opportunity for the learner to practice the behavior by themselves. Again, it might be part of the skill or it might be the entire skill. So make sure to stop at what was modeled. So we want to make sure that we're not modeling the entire skill and they only need to maybe model a short bit of it. Or we want to make sure we only didn't model the first part, but we're expecting them to model part 1 and 2. So that's why, you know, when you do make your task analysis and data sheet, those visual cues for us, the highlighter or the star next to it can be just a very quick reminder of, I need to start and stop here. I can't imagine how many, you know, students you work with, how many skills you're teaching. So you're not going to remember everything all the time. So those visual reminders are going to be really important. And then the feedback, again, reinforcement for those correct behaviors. So we did have reinforcement throughout the rest of the steps, but they might be a little bit smaller because they were a lot of help. Now we can have the big reinforcer for that maybe independent rehearsal that student engaged in. We want to provide a lot of reinforcement for a learner maybe completing it independently, and maybe a little less for a learner completing some parts independently. So we want that reinforcer to match that behavior. So kind of going back again to Michael, when he was in the laundry room, he used to throw those shirts down or those towels down. If he did it for that first time, remember, he should get a lot of time with his video game. If he needed some help, maybe he gets half that time. And, so it's just not as fun. So it's really want it to match to make sure they stay motivated and it's worth it. We want to provide that reinforcement and feedback immediately. So we went over this earlier as well. If it's not immediate, that student's not going to know exactly what's being reinforced. And if they are doing it correctly from the start, if they aren't doing it correctly, we want to provide that help immediately. So we don't want them to practice doing things incorrectly. If they need some help, stop it right there and then help them, because we can build habits quickly. So if I'm doing something incorrectly all the time, it's going to be really hard to break that habit. So we want to stop it from the start and provide that prompt and help. And then I usually like to pick, one part of the behavior or skill to focus on at a time to make it a little bit easier for the learner. So again, that might be that you're starting at the beginning of the task analysis, or you might be starting at the end, kind of looking at your learner to see where are they going to be the most successful. So these are just some examples. We won't watch the video. It's just kind of a video of a task analysis and a student going through it. But for example, with brushing teeth, the instruction might be, we're going to practice brushing our teeth. We brush our teeth in the bathroom with a toothbrush, toothpaste, and water. If it's a younger learner or someone who just needs those visuals, I might have a visual with me as well. The adult can model how to turn on the water, put the toothpaste on the toothbrush, and then wet the toothbrush. This can be modeled by an adult or a video. So especially now, with just depending on who has the skill set and with COVID, having a video model is really great. It's very fast. It's easy to repeat. You can press play, you can press pause. I really like that option too. And then the steps modeled will depend on the skill level of the learner. So again, these are only a few steps. We brush our teeth, we turn on the water, put toothpaste on the toothbrush, and wet the toothbrush. We know that toothbrushing could break that down into a heck of a lot more steps, but maybe for this learner, we don't have to. So after I model, the learner is going to rehearse it. It's their turn to practice. Your turn, brush your teeth, whatever we want that signal to be. And then we're going to provide that feedback, praise, and maybe additional reinforcement. Now that you brush your teeth, now you can go back to watching your movie, something like that. Oh, yeah. A couple more examples. This is just paired together with showing how it's related to that task analysis. So we have someone learning how to write their name, and me as the instructor is going to have that task analysis next to me, going exactly through what needs to be done. Visual schedule. This is another one that might not be just like a typical self-help skill. We can use the same thing when we're teaching someone how to use a visual schedule. There's been a lot of examples how we make our own to-do lists. We need those, so do our students. We can always fade them into more, appropriate or socially significant ones, but it's a very critical skill to have. So with the schedule, I might explain why a schedule is being used and how it works. If that's not appropriate for my learner, I can take that part out of the instruction. To prepare our students, it might occur on a day prior in order to prepare a learner that a change is coming. So we were talking with someone else here about how someone she works with has a really hard time with change. And so modeling and practicing these skills when they don't have to yet occur is a great way to do that. We don't want to practice kind of in the moment when something has to happen. We want to practice before that event occurs. The adult's going to model how to use the schedule, the student's going to practice it, and then we're going to provide that praise and reinforcement. So just a little review again, there's those 4 steps, and those steps should be repeated in succession until they are successful. We're just going to keep going through those 4 steps as much as possible and as much as needed. And allows the learner to practice and then still receive praise and reinforcement like during that feedback stage. So you get feedback, you get that reinforcement, you're getting reinforcement for attending, you're getting reinforcement for a lot of things. And remember, when that reinforcement is present, that learner is going to be more motivated to learn. So we don't want them to just do it because we're telling them to. We want them to do it because they're motivated. And again, it can be used with any skill. So we saw a lot of self-help skills. We saw an academic skill with writing their name. It could be for social skills. So greetings, asking questions, maybe learning a new game, or those other vocational skills. And then this is just kind of a last little wrap up.
Yeah, those were just some examples of just some visual and like auditory reminders that we all use. I mean, unfortunately, we have to use the Alexa to remind us to feed our dog every night. He doesn't bark and he won't beg for food for whatever reason. So sometimes, you know, we have to do that, but I have that reminder. So, you know, I've seen reminders, you know, reminding people to clean up after their pets. Employees have to wash their hands. These are things that we have all out for neurotypical people every day out in the community. So it is okay to have prompts like that for your students and, you know, have them specific to maybe that part of the task analysis that they struggled with. You could also use verbal contracts. You know, Christy talked about, you know, making sure that you're not working on things in the moment, you know, setting them up for success. So, you know, even with your daughter example, hey, tomorrow we are going to clean your room. You know, when you clean your room, you can earn, you know, we can go out for ice cream. You know, if you don't clean your room, we're not going to go out for ice cream, and have her repeat it back. So what do you need to do? I need to clean my room. Awesome. And what happens after you do that? We get to go for ice cream. Cool. What happens if you don't clean your room? We don't get to go out for ice cream. So just kind of having that expectation and having those verbal contracts before, that's a really great tool to use. And having those schedules and to-do lists, like we said, and even teaching your kids how to make their own schedules and to-do lists, right? They need to learn how to do that because they're not always going to have you there to make it for them. And then there's just an example of like a recipe too, because again, I definitely need that when I cook. If I try to cook.
So you see the number of Post-its that I have in my house, it's like insane.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm ridiculous when it comes to reminders, like
Mhm.
it's on my calendar, it's in my phone, it's on a Post-it, like, it's, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So think about what works for you and how you can adapt it for your students. So those are just some of our references. There's our emails. You can always reach out to us if you guys have any questions about anything. And I think on the handout, we had some additional resources. I think we had some links to maybe some of those task analyses that are already broken down. Obviously, you'd have to individualize it for your students. And
It's nice to have a starting point though, especially with ones
Mhm.
like you saw, that can get up to like 50 steps. So
yeah, that way you're not starting from scratch.
Yeah.
So those are all on that handout.